Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Spotlight on Ireland, Immigration Flexibilities and Opportunity, an Asian legal business and Bartra Advisors joint webinar. Today, we'll be unpacking immigration opportunities, global mobility, and international investment for Hong Kong residents. As all of you who have experienced the immigration process know, the process is typically complicated with ambiguity around visas, tax, property, and at the same time, there's quality of life opportunities to consider as well. Since COVID hit, these questions have not only grown more complex, but hasn't put people off. According to Bartra Advisors data, 84% of residents are currently considering or will consider immigrating overseas. More than 50% of respondents said they wanted to immigrate in order to improve their living environment, and 30% were thinking of their children, saying that they wanted them to obtain better education. But for Hong Kong residents, the data shows an openness to flexibility around many of the details, including timeline. Investment immigration services have specific advantages, often possessing high level of flexibility and fast-track process, product safety, and the ability to integrate with wealth management services. So of course, there are some markets where you can expect more of your investment than others. Bartra Wealth advisors are here to argue the case that Ireland is a compelling option and should be on your list. So my name is Julian, and on behalf of Asian Legal Business, I welcome you to the event today. Now I'll hand you over to James Hartshorn, CEO and co-founder of Bartra Wealth Advisors. James.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction, and thank you for hosting the webinar today. And thanks to all the attendees for attending. So as Julian said, I'm James Hartshorn. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Bartra Wealth Advisors. We're the largest provider of the IIP, which is the Immigrant Investor Programme. We have offices across Asia in Hong Kong, Shanghai, Shenzhen, Beijing, Ho Chi Minh, and this year we'll be expanding into the Middle East. So for the purpose of today, I'm just going to quickly give an overview of the program, and then we're going to get into a more detailed discussion around Ireland, the benefits of Ireland, both from an education and an economic point of view. So I'll just go through the slides now. So why Ireland? As I said, we'll get into more of this in the fireside, but Ireland is the only English-speaking country in the EU. Ireland is and has been the best performing economy in Europe for the last 7 years. Ireland has the 5th highest income per capita in the world. The Irish education system is one of the best in the world. And as a result of our education system being so good, Ireland has become an ecosystem for so many different companies across tech, pharma, and many others. Most people on the call should know that Ireland is home to most of the multinational corporations, European headquarters, including Google, Apple, Pfizer, to name a few. So as a result of this enormous amount of foreign direct investment that comes into Ireland, the Irish economy has been extremely well performing. As such, there's great employment in Ireland. And as I said, the reason for the great employment is really to do with our education system. Ireland is the most educated population in Europe. What I mean by that is we have the highest number of third level graduates per capita. And Ireland is really used as a gateway to Europe. This has been traditional with American companies, and we're starting to see more of this now with more companies from Asia, including TikTok and Huawei, for example. So that's just a little overview on the Irish economy. And as I said, I'll get into more granular detail on that in the fireside. So the program itself, so the Irish Immigrant Investor Programme is very simple and straightforward. Its current processing time is around 6 months, so it's quite fast. And one of the real strengths of the Irish program is that investors are only actually required to commit their investment after they've been approved. So the process would be that someone would make an application, that application is approved, and then they'd make their investment. So it's very de-risked from that perspective. As on the screen, the requirements are that the applicant must be over 18 years old. This is open to all non-EU residents. The main applicant can apply with a spouse. Children under 18 automatically qualify. Children between 18 and 24 may also apply if they're dependent. There's obviously a need, as with every program, for a non-criminal record. And then also something that's very specific to Ireland is that each applicant would need to demonstrate a minimum net worth of 2 million euros. And Jeff will talk a bit more about that later on. So there's 4 options under the IIP. There's an enterprise investment, which is a €1 million investment for a minimum of 3 years, and this is into an Irish enterprise. There's endowment, which is essentially a philanthropic donation. So this is where someone would give away money to a charity. So in this instance, you wouldn't get the funds back. In the enterprise option, you do get your money back after 3 or 5 years, depending on the investment you choose. The investment fund, similar to the enterprise option, it's just a different vehicle through which you can invest. Again, a €1 million investment for a minimum of 3 years. And then the last option is a REIT. There's 3 major REITs in Ireland. This investment is actually a €2 million investment. And then that's for a minimum of 3 years, and the repayment is staggered over the last 2 years. So what the market has seen typically is that the enterprise investment option has been the most popular, with about 77.2% of people taking that up. And then the REIT has seen the least activity, and then relatively small activity among the other two sectors. So the enterprise investment is actually what we focus on for a variety of reasons. And we'll talk more about those investments as we go through the presentation. So why Bartra? Bartra are fully integrated. So, we have offices, as I mentioned, all over Asia. We have document processing teams. So, we can put clients' files together. We're also the people who manage the investment. We're also the developer. Bartra are one of the largest real estate developers in Ireland, and we develop across quite a large range of asset categories. So we build residential housing, we build commercial real estate, we build nursing homes, we build social housing, we build co-living units. We're involved in renewable energy. And the 2 investment categories that are relevant under the IIP are social housing and nursing homes. So we can't use funds in any of our other divisions of the business because that's not in line with what the government want. The government have clearly said that they want funds from this program to be channeled into social housing and nursing homes. And this is to do with the fact that there's a very large undersupply in both of these sectors. So this is one vehicle through which funds can be channeled into those undersupplied areas of the economy. So the benefits really of why one would choose the Irish Immigrant Investor Programme is that the IIP allows you to obtain residency without actually moving to Ireland. So the residency requirement under the programme is just 1 day per year. So that's 1 day per calendar year to live in Ireland, which obviously creates a lot of flexibility. A lot of our clients are doing this for the future. So they'll do this now, and then maybe in 5 or 6 years when their kids are 12 or 13, they might want to go to an Irish high school. Or in some cases that one of the applicants, one of the spouse, be that the husband or wife, are running a business here in Asia, and they want to be able to maintain that. And then in some cases we have clients whereby the business owner would stay in Asia, and then his spouse and children would move to Ireland, and they would sort of set up life there and start going to school in an Irish school. So that's kind of the demographic usually, and how things play out. But the advantage of that obviously is that you can obtain the Irish residency by only spending 1 day a year in the country. So it allows that flexibility, which I think is a really strong advantage. The other thing I mentioned earlier is the approval first, investment later. So there's no risk that you're going to make an investment and then your visa is denied. That can't happen in terms of the chronological order of events. So to reiterate what I said, the application is made. After approval, you make the investment. So it's very straightforward. Fast approval between 4 and 6 months. This can vary. Obviously with COVID, kind of slowed things down a bit. So at the moment it's running about 6 months. And Ireland is quite unique in that Ireland has a special relationship with the UK. And this is governed by something called the Common Travel Area, the CTA. So if one was to obtain Irish residence or Irish citizenship, which can be obtained after 5 years, and you had an Irish passport, the Irish passport actually allows you to live and work in the UK as well as the EU. So Brexit has obviously left UK outside of the EU, meaning that most EU citizens would now need a visa of some description to go and live in the UK. This isn't the case for Ireland because of the CTA. So the CTA preceded the EU. So as an Irish passport holder, I can go and live and work and even vote actually in the UK. This is all detailed on the Home Office website. So if you go onto the UK Home Office website and just search common travel area, it's also on the Irish citizenship information website. So there's plenty of information online about this to validate what I'm saying. Another benefit of Ireland is that there's no language requirement. Ireland is an English-speaking country. We do have our native language of Irish, but it's not used daily, really. And it's not really used commercially. And actually, very few people in Ireland can actually speak Irish. So English is the first language in Ireland. And then there's no real travel limits on people. I mean, if you come to Ireland for 1 day per year, you qualify. So there's no sort of minimum requirement. Some countries have 6 months, for example, like the UK, which require you to live there for 6 months, which doesn't give people the flexibility if they wanted to perhaps keep their businesses here in Asia and just travel there once a year. So what we do, we, as I said, we're a developer, so we build and manage the projects. We maintain the investment for investors. We also have a file processing team. We have in-house legal. We cover all the bases. And we've done this with over 300 clients, and every client we've had has been successful. Every application we put to the government has been approved, and every renewal has been approved as well. So the way this works is that you make the investment, and then 2 years later, you renew for 3 years. So it's a combined 5 years. And then every 5 years, you renew for another 5 years into perpetuity. So that's sort of an overview on us and what we do. Yeah, and then just to reiterate, the group has over $1 billion in assets under management. Our social housing portfolio is in the region of 310 million. Our nursing home portfolio is in the region of 130 million with 435 beds, 435 social units and 823 nursing home beds. Yeah, and as I said, we've had over 300 successful clients. Every client has been successful, and we maintain a 100% approval rate and renewal rate. So I think I've just gone over the 10 minutes. So I think we can move to the next section. Thank you.
Hi, James. Just to introduce myself, I'm Elizabeth Beattie. I'm a journalist at Asian Legal Business. I had a few technical issues, but hopefully you can hear and see me now.
Yeah, we're all good.
Wonderful. So we're now moving into the fireside chat portion. And I'd love to welcome Jeffrey Ling, who's the Regional Director of Bartra Wealth Advisors. But Jeffrey,
hi, Elizabeth. Yes.
Hi. That's great. I'd love to just start, if possible, with a bit of a broad question for both of you. Based on what you were saying, James, the IIP provides a great deal of flexibility. I'd love to know a little bit more about the freedom that the program offers.
Okay. Well, essentially, the main thing is that is the residency requirements. So the residency requirements are basically 1 day per annum. So this is quite different to other programs. Other programs, we take the UK, for example, it's the closest neighbor we have. The UK requires 6 months a year. So, if you need to be in the UK for 6 months a year, you're not going to be able to maintain your business here. Or if it's a situation that, your kids are in primary school in Asia and you want them to go through the Asian curriculum to a point at which they go to high school in Ireland, which could be 7 years away. It doesn't give you the flexibility to do that either. So the 1 day a year is really a very attractive part of the program because it gives people that flexibility around whatever their circumstances are, whether it's to do with the age of the kids and at what point they want those children to enter the Irish education system. Maybe that's at university level, so it could be quite a while off yet, or whether it's to do with work. So I think the real differentiated with Ireland and most programs is that flexibility around the 1 day, because it gives people options. You're not committed to having to move to a country and basically spend a large amount of time there every year.
And perhaps I could, sorry, Elizabeth, and perhaps I could just add to that, in terms of the process of naturalization. So the good thing about the IIP program is that, it doesn't require the entire family to move to Ireland, first of all, right? So the parent can remain in Hong Kong, children can move to Ireland and continue with their studies. And for them, if they have stayed there for up to 5 years, and when they reach 18 years old, they can actually apply for an Irish passport. And that way, no one is tied together. The process of naturalization can be done separately, which also offers a great level of flexibility here.
Yeah, this is also very beneficial for some of our PRC clients because PRC doesn't offer dual citizenship. I know that Hong Kong does. So a lot of people mightn't want to actually nationalize. And in some countries, the parent is required to nationalize in order for the child to nationalize. So that's not the case in Ireland. So again, it gives that flexibility. And India, for example, as well, is a non-dual citizenship country, as many countries are. So, you know, in instances like that, where you don't want to actually give up your country of origin passport, you have the flexibility there to maintain that while your kids, if they choose, they wanted a new passport, they have that option.
And for say a child who is a new graduate from Ireland's education system, what's the job market look like? What kind of future opportunities are they presented with?
Arguably the best in the world. I mean, if you look at Ireland, I'm honest. Ireland has the highest concentration of multinational corporations, probably in the world. So if you look at over the last year, most of what you've seen in the media around most economies has been very negative. If you contrast that with Ireland, so just at a high level to list a few. So Intel have announced 1,600 new jobs. Stripe have announced 1,000 new jobs. TikTok have announced hundreds of new jobs. Workday have announced 400 new jobs. Huawei have announced hundreds of new jobs. Microsoft are expanding hundreds of new jobs in the digital space. Hewlett Packard have announced hundreds of new jobs. Tesla are making significant investments. Google have enormous investments in Ireland. They have over 10,000 people and expanding rapidly. Apple have been in Ireland for over 40 years. And Apple have over 10,000 people, again, expanding rapidly. Icon Ventures are expanding rapidly. AdLife have committed to 250 million in terms of FDI. Woodbury Capital are put in hundreds of millions to Ireland, and Naked Collective are expanding as well. This is just a few. Every day you look in the Irish press, there's this type of news, you know, and it's like 60 jobs here, 100 jobs there, whatever it is. All of these companies at home are expanding, and the range of companies at home is huge. So you've got the big tech giants, they're all there. All the pharma companies are there. And you've got a lot of really niche companies in the nanoscience place. There's a lot of agri-tech stuff happening at home. So there's really wide variety of things going on at home. And you've got an incredible ecosystem of these companies there. And it's like Dublin's not a big city. It's 1.3 million people. So it's a fairly captive audience. And these guys are all running grad programs. They all offer internships to people during university, and they all always obviously have very big recruitment drives, judging by the figures I just mentioned. So, you know, I would say Ireland is probably one of the most exciting places for grads in the world right now.
Jeffrey, I've got a question I'd love to field to you. Immigrants are often a little reluctant to sell assets. What kind of options are there for individuals who fall in that category? What are your thoughts on that?
Sure. So for the IIP program, there is a requirement that you would need a total assets of 2 million euros, right? And in that case, that can consist of anything from property, cash, stocks, bonds, anything that has a cash value in it, even insurance with policies with cash value in it. So in that sense, right, for those who do not want to, say, sell all the assets in order to make up for the 2 million, what they can do is they can actually remortgage, right, get a loan out with the property, right? And with what we offer in Bartra, we actually offer an investment with return. So in fact, with that return, essentially it can actually potentially cover the interest on the loan itself. So again, it's a win-win situation here. I think there are many different scenarios that you can play with, and the key is with the IIP program, you don't actually have to sell all your assets. First of all, in order to maintain reach the 2 million assets requirement, as well as actually receiving your permanent residency, you don't actually have to relocate to Ireland immediately. So that way, you can still hold on to your assets in Hong Kong.
Yeah, the 2 million asset requirement is basically assets. So that can be real estate, it can be stocks, bonds, a variety of different things. So that in itself requires no action. That's just basically to demonstrate. The program is designed to attract high net worths, and the 2 million threshold is what the government has decided that what that needs to be. So in order to qualify, that's basically the first minimum requirement, is that you need to have 2 million in assets.
Interesting. I'd love to also touch on why NH and SH fixed assets may be an attractive option. Maybe James, this might be something you can.
Yes. So I mean, those priorities were set out by the government, actually. So there was a statement made by INIS, who are the governing body within the Irish government of the programme, and they listed 3 priority sectors that they wanted to see funding going into, and those were social housing, nursing homes, and something called primary care centres. So we are the largest developer of new build nursing homes in Ireland. We're also the largest developer of new build social housing in Ireland. And we've predominantly funded those with IIP investors. So the reason for that is that nursing homes in Ireland are undersupplied. Nursing homes all over the world, by the way, are undersupplied. But in Ireland, that's very much the case. So there is a priority there to try and get capital into those areas. And then social housing is the same. There's, I think, over 70,000 people waiting on social housing lists. So there's a huge undersupply there. And that's a sort of byproduct of the financial crisis. So without going into too much history, after the financial crisis, the banking sector globally was very much crippled for a number of years. And in Ireland, a lot of the developers were basically paralyzed for a few years because of the banking situation. So you had a period where you had no liquidity, which could be leveraged to develop, and you had no developers to do it. So there was a period in Ireland where there was very, very few houses produced, which has led to a housing shortage, which still actually exists in Ireland. And as a byproduct of that, obviously, social housing is massively affected. So the social housing demand is enormous, and there needs to be a large amount of capital put into place to address that. And what the government have done rather cleverly is created a very attractive leasing system for social housing to encourage developers like us to build social housing. So with our social housing developments, essentially what happens is that we will sign a 25-year lease with the Irish government, which is index linked and is based at 95% of market value. So I mean, if market value is €1,000 for a 1-bed, our lease will be valued at $950, for example. So it's an extremely powerful covenant. And what this does is it allows us to create our social housing developments and essentially turn them into financial products. So once this is finished, what you've got is a fixed real estate asset with a fixed income from the Irish government. So it's an extremely attractive, investment for people. So what we do with our social housing is essentially we will identify areas where social housing is required. We will consult the local government, confirm that they need the social housing in that area. We'll then sign an agreement for lease, which is basically the lease is attached to that, and it basically says upon practical completion, when we finish construction, the lease becomes effective. So it's a hugely de-risked product because we actually sign that agreement for lease before we start construction. So it really takes a lot of the risk out of it. Like when you're, as residential developers will understand, usually when you start a residential project, you're basing it on sales figures that mightn't arise for 2 years. And a lot can happen in those 2 years, as we saw in 2007, 2008, and coronavirus. And I know coronavirus hasn't had particularly negative effect on asset prices, but, you can have these black swan events. So to have the price locked in on the front end before you start construction, it really de-risks the entire project. Another reason why there's a priority for private companies to get into the social housing space is that the Irish government, like every government in Europe, is curtailed on their borrowings through something called the Growth and Stability Pact, which was introduced after the financial crisis. So the Growth and Stability Pact limits borrowing for capital projects to, I think, 3% of GDP. So essentially, any government who has a restriction like that will want to use that for really core assets like hospitals, education, road, and things that the private sector couldn't really do. So basically what they're trying to encourage is that the private sector would take the capital burden of building these assets and then would supply them to the Irish government. So the Irish government essentially end up in a situation where they have the stock they need, but they haven't had to lay out hundreds of millions in capital. So it really is a kind of win-win for everyone. It's a smart way of doing it. And then on the nursing home side, again, there's a huge undersupply of nursing homes. Ireland is quite unique. The nursing home environment in Ireland used to be very kind of localized, mom and pop shop type stuff. There was like a lot of sort of privately owned nursing homes that were dotted around the country, none of which were very, very large, sort of 40, 50 beds. And there hasn't been a company of our scale to come into the space and really, create top of the line, really premium nursing homes at scale. And that's what we're doing now. So we've opened 3 nursing homes to date with a combined beds of almost 500. And then our pipeline has close to 1,000. So we're starting another nursing home actually in about two weeks. But these facilities are the best in the country. One of them we've let to the Irish health authorities. I would just call it the HSE, kind of the equivalent of the NHS. And the way the nursing homes work is that essentially the government will pay a subsidy per bed. So each occupied bed we have in the nursing home, the government pay a subsidy for that. So they're both government-backed assets in terms of income, and they're both in areas of huge undersupply. So I mean, very basic economics will tell you that the demand and supply laws. So that's why both are desirable from a government side. And I think from a government side, I think the way the Irish program works, I think is probably the best out there, because a lot of programs are real estate based, and real estate based with the specifically in resi. So what you'll have is, this has happened in Lisbon, it's happened in Athens too. What happens is, because you're allowing people to avail of the visa benefits through the acquisition of real estate, everyone obviously wants to buy in the city centre. So what you have is you have a mismatch in pricing where the international buyers are able to pay more than local buyers, for example. And what happens is you end up with pockets of the city which are all foreign owned, and then the locals can't afford to buy there. This happened in Lisbon, and this essentially led to the Portuguese government. I don't know where it is at the moment, but I do recall that they had announced that they were going to stop real estate acquisitions in Lisbon, Porto, and the Algarve, for example, for this very reason. And as well, I don't have the data, but I'd question the economic value of that to the economy. It's not something that everyone feels. Like in Ireland, for example, there's huge benefits for social housing. It's a social requirement. The right citizens have. It also alleviates the burden on local authorities, because if the local authorities don't have these facilities, they need to go to private landlords, and it becomes quite cumbersome. Also, they're at the mercy of the market. If rents go up steeply, they're sort of at that mercy. So, it creates a stable supply to the government, and also allows the government to control costs in that sector. So the economic benefit is huge. And then the nursing homes are the same. And in both cases, in nursing homes, for example, like if you have a situation where there aren't enough nursing home beds, which is, as I said, the case almost all over the world. A lot of these people will end up in hospital beds because their health has deteriorated and they can't take care of themselves. So they could find themselves in a hospital bed, and hospital care is, I think, about 7 or 8 times more expensive than nursing home care. And they don't necessarily need hospital care. It's just that because the facilities aren't there. So by creating more nursing homes, you're alleviating the burden, or you're relieving that pressure from the hospital system as well, which then creates a lot of benefits on that side too. So the way the Irish program works, it really is, it kind of ticks a lot of boxes on the economy side. Like, it's bringing in a large amount of FDI, and that FDI is being used very intelligently to facilitate government policy.
Very interesting. Jeffrey, did you have anything? I noticed you nodding. Do you have anything you might want to add to that?
No, I think James covered most of the points there. But again, the main thing is with social housing and nursing home, these are all social infrastructures, so it makes it very safe. Let alone it's government backed, right? So again, if for any investors who are looking for capital protection, right, I think there's no better option than social housing and nursing homes. Again, there's a huge demand for these type of assets, not just in Ireland, like James mentioned, anywhere else in the world. So again, capital protection. Bear in mind, this is something that every investor should be aware of.
And we've spoken on those positives, and there's clearly a gain, and there's clearly compelling, makes it a compelling reason. In terms of the risks associated, what should what should individuals be aware of about the potential risks associated with the IIP option?
Well, I mean, there are a number of ways to invest for the purpose of immigration, right? If you look at the chart here, there are funds, bonds, startups, even. For funds, for example, let's just take that as an example here. And what funds lack is transparency, right? For investors, it's important for them to really understand what is the underlying assets. What are these funds actually investing in, right? And take IIP, for example. There are funds out there that are currently investing in the hospitality sector. And under the current pandemic situation, I think this particular sector is really at halt right now. So again, that would affect the performance of the fund. With bonds, again, there's that volatility. With government bonds, okay, it's maybe a little bit safer, but again, it's not. There's no capital protection. It's not guaranteed. If we look at startup, for example, with that, it involves a lot of different steps. You have to submit a business plan. You have to get involved in hiring. You submit your business experience proof, for example. So there are a lot of different variables in place, which could ultimately affect your chances of obtaining a visa, for example. So in terms of what IIP has to offer, especially with the enterprise investment option, it's a very straightforward option. All you have to do is invest into an approved project, and what you get out of that is a permanent residency. And in between, there is no, there's no additional requirements. So again, it's very straightforward. It's very easy to do.
Yeah, to build on what Jeff said there, when our investors invest with us, they invest into a specific project. They know where it is. We give them the address. There's no guesswork. We actually have live construction cameras on all of our developments too, and we give access to those construction cameras to our clients, so they can actually see the construction happening in real time. So again, there's no mystery to it. There's no sort of like you kind of put your money somewhere and then something happens and you don't really know what's going on. There's none of that, right? And I think the two main options in Ireland. Ireland doesn't have a bond option, as we said earlier on. So I think the only program in the world that's still doing bonds, I think, is Canada. I need to check that.
And Australia.
Yeah, so Australia, part of the investment is bonds, but then a large part of it has to be a risk as well. So I think pure bonds, I think, is still Canada. So for the sake of this conversation, bonds probably isn't that relevant. So the two you have in Ireland are funds and real estate. And, a fund is just a vehicle through which you invest into the underlying asset. So, I mean, to look at the vehicle, I don't think is what you should be looking at. You should be looking at the underlying assets. Another thing, the advice I would give to investors certainly would be just like, who are you investing with? What's their track record? When people come to us, it's like, you've been doing IIP for sort of 4 years now. What have you done? It's like, we just show them a brochure with like, there's our first nursing home, there's our second one, address, date of opening, capital expenditure, number of beds. It's all very detailed and it's all very transparent. Being transparent is a big part of what we do because we have nothing to hide. And I think a lack of transparency to me is always a red flag. So if I went to a provider and I was like, can you outline in detail, address everything you've done to date? If there was anything other than absolute clarity to that answer, I would deem that as a red flag. The other thing is to do with track record. Richard, who is the founder of Bartra, Richard Barrett, is an incredibly successful entrepreneur. He's been developing assets in Ireland and across the world for the last 40 years. He's listed companies in Singapore, he's listed companies in the UK. He's had developments in, Ireland, England, Spain, Russia, mainland China, all over the world. At the time they entered, they were the largest non-Chinese developer in mainland. So just incredible track record. To be able to come to somewhere like the PRC and develop as a foreign developer, I think in itself is a phenomenal achievement. I've lived here for 10 years and I can certainly attest to how difficult that would be. So track record is vital. And when you go to Dublin, and you drive around the city, we often do this with clients actually. We'll drive around the city and we'll just go to various projects that Richard's built, be that the National Convention Centre, be that the Google's headquarters, the headquarters of most of the major banks, Bank of Ireland, AIB, to list a few, Ritz-Carlton, the Westin, there's just so many. I think this really just instills a level of confidence because, development is one of those things. It's easy to talk about development, but it's not easy to do it. And if you look at most countries around the world, Hong Kong's a good example. There's 5 or 6 big developers. Ireland is the same. Most countries, there's a handful of people who really know what they're doing. And then there's a lot of other people who don't, so it's really important to make sure you're with one of the ones who do. This is the only way to prove this is track record. As I said, it's easy to, make projections and, tell a nice story, but it's not easy to have a 40-year track record of the most successful developments in Ireland. So I think that's a really important one. And transparency is the second one. Transparency around what exact underlying investment and what exact underlying assets is my money going into. If it's a case that it's going to go into a fund and it's going to sit in a fund for a while, and then while the fund managers go out and try and find a project, and then they might find a project for a while, that creates a delay in the application process. So the IIP has been pretty clear that they start the clock, so to speak, so the 3 years from when the fund invests into the asset, not when you invest into the fund. So that's another really important part. Like with us, there's no lag. Money comes in, it goes straight to the project. Another thing I think that's like vital is to do with third-party validation. So if you're talking to someone in Ireland and say, okay, you use IIP as one source of funding, what other source of funding do you have? Because the IIP could stop tomorrow. But that's the reality. Any of these programs, they're very much at the government's discretion as to what happens. So if the IIP stops tomorrow and you're halfway through construction on the site, what happens? Like in our case, we have very strong relationships with every financial institution in Ireland. We have very strong relationships with AIB, the largest bank, Allied Irish Bank. They've lent us hundreds of millions across different projects. Bank of Ireland are the same. Ulster Bank have also lent to us. We work with a lot of non-bank funds in Ireland, to name a few. One of the main ones I was going to mention there, is ISIF, which is the Irish Strategic Investment Fund, which is actually a government body, and they've invested in our company. So when you start to see this type of thing, it's like I talk about the third-party validation, and as I said, everyone can come and tell a nice story, but it's like, what are other people saying about you? So on the ISIF website, we're featured there as one of their developments. On Activate Capital. So Activate Capital is a joint venture between KKR, one of the largest hedge funds in the world, and ISIF. We're listed on their website across a few different developments they've invested with us on. So this is, I would say, crucial, because it covers a few bases. First of all, as you know, banks have the highest level of scrutiny when it comes to due diligence. So, if our projects are good enough for a bank, I think they should 100% be good enough for a retail investor. And it takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. Some of our investors mightn't have the resources to conduct that level of due diligence. Like we always advise everyone to conduct independent due diligence on any investment, of course. But that's not always the case. So I think that, having that third-party validation is vital, really. And then having someone like, the government investing in you as well, I think is a really strong signal towards, our strength as a development company, our projects, and just the people within our company. If you go to our website, for example, and just look at the bios of the people in our organization, they're all sort of 20-30 track record in what they do, 23 year track record in what they do, have achieved incredible things working both in and out of the government. So you have this really deep sort of like pool of knowledge and experience there. And in a development team, that is the most important thing. You need to have people who understand things like planning intricately. That's one of the most important things in Irish development is planning. Planning is quite a complex project, and you just need to have people who really understand how to navigate that, because that's where a lot of people fall down. So the experience of the team, the track record, the third-party validation, and full visibility on what you're investing in, that's really what I would be looking for. And if I couldn't get clarity on any one of those things, I'd see that as a red flag.
Interesting. Definitely. If we compare like the IIP with other investment immigration programs, you mentioned Australia and Canada, I think. How does it weigh up against those other kind of programs?
I think ultimately, when people look at these things, there's two big considerations. It's like, what is the program and how does that work for me? And then, is this a country I want to be in? I would consider Ireland, Canada, and Australia all to be fairly similar, actually. We'd be closer to New Zealand than Australia, but we're all English-speaking countries. We all have good economies. We're all relatively safe and stable countries. So I mean, yeah, and we all have very good education systems. So I mean, across that, as you start to get more granular, then you could probably start to prioritize Ireland because of some of the things I mentioned earlier on about the digital ecosystem. How sort of close that is within your circle. Like when you're in university, a lot of your friends are going to be doing internships in these different companies. So the tightness of that ecosystem in Dublin, I'd say we'll put it ahead of the other two countries you mentioned. And then it comes down to the complexity of the program. So if we look at Ireland to Australia, for example, it's 5 times more expensive. Well, with currency, probably 4 times. I think the Australian program is 5 million, for example, and the investment is spread across a few different things. There's a bit of VC involved in there, which is obviously high risk by its nature. And then there's, I think there's an equity investment, and then there's a bond part, and then financial products. It's relatively complex as to what you're investing in. So that comes down to, I suppose, how much of your net worth are you willing to allocate to one of these projects? And I suppose how much you're willing to put at risk. I'm pretty sure the Australian program requires $500,000 into a VC. So that's very much at risk. So that's a consideration. This is just when you go beyond the country level and focus purely on the program. Canada program is pretty solid. I mean, it's been around for the longest time. It's probably by numbers received the most investors. But the program at a national level was closed in 2016, I believe, and some of the provincial programs are still going, but there are limited spaces on that, and there's huge demand for those spaces. So, and there's also, it's quite technical in terms of the application process, and then things like language and stuff like that. So it mightn't suit everyone. Like some of the profile of some of our clients, for example, is if they're in the mainland and they're a bit older, they mightn't have the degree of English required to kind of get into one of those programs. So that's a factor to consider too. So I think Ireland offers the most flexibility. Definitely, I mean, there's no language requirement, as I said, and it's probably the quickest timeline. In fact, it's definitely the quickest timeline in around 6 months. So the fact that it's super simple, super transparent, and very fast, I think is what really makes it very attractive, contrasted with the other two.
I would love to ask Jeffrey a question about tax and about global tax.
Sure.
This is often, often something on people's mind. Pre and post migration, what's the tax situation for IIP applicants?
I think the IIP provides the flexibility of only having to visit Ireland 1 day per year, right, in order to maintain their permanent residency. So under this scenario, investors don't actually have to worry about any Irish tax implications here, because you would only be deemed as a tax resident if you have spent more than 183 days in a year in Ireland, right? So in that sense, if you're just doing the IIP further to obtain residency, but you remain in Hong Kong, that way you don't have to worry about any potential tax exposures here. And one point to note is, for any individuals who are non-domiciled in Ireland, right, if you're non-domiciled in Ireland, that actually qualifies for the remittance basis of taxation in Ireland. So what that means is that the charge of tax can only be limited to Irish source income and gains. So anything that is outside of Ireland, right, would be entirely free from Irish tax, let's just say, as long as it's not remitted back to Ireland. So in that sense, that you would also be saved from any tax implications in Ireland.
And just to sort of remind the audience, we're not tax advisors, and everyone's tax situation is always very unique. It's composed of assets in different jurisdictions, income streams arriving from different places. So we would always, like what Jeff said is true, and that's a very high level, but we would always encourage people to take independent tax advice and to structure their affairs in a way that's going to be an optimal for their particular situation. And we have a variety of partners we work with, some within the Big Four and then more boutique firms, but we have a whole range of partners we work with on that, and where people are usually able to get their tax situation into a very optimal scenario, pre or post investment. But as Jeff said, I mean, the tax situation only becomes relevant if you become a tax resident. So I mean, you could do the program today and not become a tax resident in Ireland for 10 years, and you'd have no tax liability in Ireland. It's different, obviously, from countries like the US, where they have a global taxation policy.
Interesting. You mentioned earlier lack of a need to be fluent in English. I'm curious, James, if you can give us more of a sense of where do Hong Kong people live in Ireland, what is the properties like, a little bit about what life is like in Ireland for Hong Kong people.
That's great in Ireland for everyone. Let me see. Most of our clients, well, first of all, most of our clients don't move. So only about 15 to 20% of our clients actually relocate to Ireland, and probably closer to 15 actually. And this is, as I mentioned earlier on, like a lot of people are doing this now for the future. You know, maybe their kids are still young. They want them to go through the primary phase of education in their home country. So typically people will move for high school. We do have some families that have moved at an earlier stage. Most of our clients will live in South County Dublin or D4, D6. These are always areas we recommend because this is where the best schools in the country are concentrated. Almost all of our clients have moved to Dublin, maybe some to Wicklow, which is just below Dublin, but it's very close. So that's typically the advice we'd give. Somewhere like Blackrock, for example, like we have one or two developments there, and almost all of our clients are interested in buying there. Blackrock is a very interesting area. It's a very nice part of the city. It also has one of the best schools. Again, biased because I went there. But there's it's close to one of the major universities as well, UCD. The other major university is Trinity College, which is in the city centre, so that's fairly accessible from everywhere. Blackrock is only sort of 20 minutes from the city centre, so again, very, very accessible. But the areas I would recommend for Dublin definitely would be Dublin 4, Dublin 6, and South County Dublin. They're for me the optimal areas to live. So most of our clients basically will be looking at those types of areas. Other people would buy real estate for different reasons. So some people are buying real estate to move, other people are buying investment properties. Investment properties probably better off in the city centre. You know, there's, as I said, there's thousands and thousands of people living in Ireland on short-term accommodation because they're, you know, doing a 3 or 5 year stint with Google or Goldman Sachs or whoever it is. So, you know, there's a huge rental market there. Irish people traditionally like to buy homes. I think that's the same in Hong Kong. I think that's something we kind of share in common. I know some European countries, most people that preference for buying isn't there, and people are happy to rent for their lives. But in Ireland, there's definitely a culture of buying property, which is also very positive, because if you contrast that with somewhere like, you know, I know I've mentioned Lisbon and Athens, but like when you're in a city that the real estate market depends predominantly on foreign investment, you know, that creates a risk, because if that foreign investment is only there because of policy, like for example, if we take Lisbon, the majority of investments being made in the real estate sector in Lisbon are due to either the golden visa or the non-habitual tax residency program. So if either of those programs were to stop, the buying power is massively reduced, because you lose the international element and you're relying on the local buying power. And the difference is like enormous, particularly in that city, and Athens will be the same. Whereas in Ireland, I mean, Ireland is the 5th highest income per capita in the world. So, I mean, the Irish housing market is very, very sustainable because it's built on affordability at a local rate. So after the financial crisis, the Irish central bank had some very intelligent and very practical solutions to put in place to prevent another housing bubble. And this was to do with access to liquidity, access to debt. And basically in Ireland, if you want to get a mortgage, you can only get 3.5 times your salary. And on your first home, you need a deposit of 10%. So I think if it's a couple, it's 4 times their combined salary or something like that. So it's very sustainable, and it creates an environment where people are only buying houses they can afford. So the sort of old days of, you know, 110% mortgages and, you know, no deposit, all that craziness, you know, that's long gone, and it's very much the opposite now. So it's created a very sustainable housing market. And obviously as a foreign buyer, you know, your resale is into that. So you're not relying on foreign investors, you're not relying on policy, you know, you're relying on the fundamentals of the market, which is, which in Ireland's case is extremely strong, you know, because you do have a lot of very well-paid people in the country, and you have a very sustainable housing market, which is controlled by a central bank, which are have a very sustainable policy around leverage or borrowing or mortgages, whatever language you want to use.
So for those who are convinced, really interested in the program, what kind of information do you have to provide? How does the government make a decision about an approval?
Well, the criteria are pretty straightforward. I mean, the government set out guidelines, and if you comply with the guidelines, then there should be no reason why you shouldn't get approval. It's pretty straightforward. Once you're of good character, once you've legally obtained your funds, there needs to be a source of funds, which for Hong Kong is very easy to do. And then once you can display a net worth of 2 million, I mean, it is pretty straightforward. And, the program is there to attract high net worths, and once you can demonstrate that and you can show that you've legally obtained your money, your funds, then it's pretty straightforward. And in terms of the granular detail around, this document needs to be notarized there, and you need to have these accounts sort of validated by this person or whatever it is, all that granular stuff, that's more of a conversation with us. I wouldn't want to bore your listeners with the details on that, but I mean, the thing to remember there is that we've had over 300 successful clients, which puts us way ahead of the rest of the market, and every single one of those being approval. So, suffice to say, we know what we're doing when it comes to that, and we know how to navigate a client through that process at every step of the way. And we've got super strong support service. As I said, we've got 5 offices across Asia, and we've got over 25 staff here. So, I mean, we've kind of got someone for every part of the equation. And we make it super simple for people because, it should be. It's a big decision, and it's a family decision, and people are, making a decision for the rest of their lives. So it's very important that we can navigate them through that and make that as easy as possible for them.
They're not going to get lost in shadowy bureaucracy.
No,
not at all.
No.
Jeff, I was wondering if you might be able to offer some successful client cases and kind of walk us through these a little bit.
Sorry, did you say existing customers?
Some successful client cases. Sorry.
Successful clients, sure. Yeah, I think in terms of the typical, most common kind of client profile that we see in Hong Kong, definitely would be professionals. Again, there is that 2 million asset requirement, so high net worth individuals, professionals, i.e. teachers, lawyers, doctors, engineers, whatnot, right? And for these guys, what they look for in terms of deciding which program to go with is really the flexibility. Again, going back to the point of flexibility. In most cases, a lot of our clients, even though they have obtained their PR, they're still in Hong Kong, purely for the fact that they're not ready to relocate just yet, right? They probably still want to make a couple more years of income here in Hong Kong. Again, it is a high salary city. It's often hard to just give that up and relocate. And with that, the IIP offers a high level of flexibility, right? All they have to do is visit Ireland 1 day per year. And with that, also, you're not exposed to any tax implications in Ireland too. So with that, it's often become a very obvious choice. And also, I think a lot of our clients would consider the future of their children too. I think children plays a big factor when it comes to deciding which country or which program to go with. And with Ireland, obviously, James has mentioned a lot of great universities, a lot of great schools there. It provides a very good opportunity for a lot of our clients, children, because again, they can be studying in Ireland for 5 years. They can get their passports, right? And when the parents are ready, then they can move and join their children. Again, it's that flexibility there, as well as I think in terms of job opportunities, right? What happens after they graduate, right? They don't have to worry about having to come back to Hong Kong, for example, or go elsewhere to look for job opportunities, right? Ireland has that in place already, with all the different multinational companies that James has mentioned that are currently based in Ireland, offers plenty of opportunities, whether it's internships, placements, full-time opportunities. It's something that a lot of our parents are indeed looking forward to. So again, it's the flexibility, the prospect for the children in Ireland, and just the whole straightforwardness of the program. All you have to do is invest. There's no language requirement. There's no exams, tests, none of that, right? It's a very straightforward program. And again, with the 6 months approval time, you're able to get a very high quality residency in a very short amount of time.
The biggest challenge we face is that like there's so much about Ireland that people don't know. You know, like, I mean, I don't know how many people in the call knew that Ireland had the 5th highest income per capita in the world. Not that many, I would have thought, and it's certainly to do with all the digital ecosystem there, how Ireland is positioning itself as an innovation hub, actually through 2 specific government projects called Future Jobs Ireland and Project Ireland 2040. So Ireland is really positioning itself. It's already the tech hub of Europe. It's becoming the finance hub of Europe. Most of the financial institutions have relocated to Ireland after Brexit, and it's really becoming an innovation hub. So if you look at the future, right? I mean, you know, jobs like accounting and things like that, they're not really where you want to be going. A lot of that stuff's going to be automated. A lot of that stuff's going to be on a blockchain. There's going to be new technologies coming out all the time. So you want to be somewhere very innovative, and you want to be, you know, you want your kids doing things like coding. You know, like one of the most successful coding schools in Ireland has come out of some of the most successful coding schools globally has come out of Ireland, Coding Dojo. You know, so this is kind of where I think people are thinking, and I think as you look forward, like into the future, I think somewhere that is very digitally focused, that has a very strong tech environment, that is very innovation focused, I think is really where people want to be. And I think that's the big draw with Ireland. You know, Ireland is very comparable to Singapore in many ways, and that is it's a gateway into a very large area. Singapore's and Hong Kong to a certain degree are the gateways into Asia, and Ireland is very much the gateway into Europe. And then, you know, it's one of the biggest markets in the world. It's super exciting and super interesting. So it creates a huge amount of opportunities. And I think that's really what people are looking at when they're considering Ireland as a place to immigrate to.
Certainly. We've just got a little bit more time, so I wanted to jump over on some of the audience questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
Teresa said, James, I didn't quite catch what you said about dual citizenship. Can the Irish passport holder be a citizen of another country?
Yes, I have an Irish passport and a British passport because my father was born in the UK. If, for example, my mother was born in Spain, I could get a Spanish passport. You could have as many passports as you want. The restriction I mentioned is more to do with other countries. So for, like the PRC, for example, don't allow dual citizenship. India don't allow dual citizenship. So, but Ireland do. And Hong Kong allow dual citizenship, as I'm sure everyone knows. So, you know, as a Hong Kong person, you would be able to get an Irish passport, keep your Hong Kong passport, and then have your Irish passport as well.
I wonder what's the maximum number of passports you can hold.
Someone has, I don't know. I'm sure someone's out there. Yeah. Well, a lot of Americans have Irish passports too, because the way Ireland works is that it's 2 generations up. So basically, if one of your grandparents was born in Ireland, that would create eligibility for an Irish passport. And obviously, the Irish-American connection is unbelievably strong, and there's a huge amount of Irish Americans out there, just historically. So, I mean, there are a lot of Irish Americans who are able to get Irish passports. Just on the Irish, another point of information that I can't imagine many people know, just on the links between Ireland and the US. Ireland has actually received more foreign direct investment from the US. So that's the US investing into Ireland in the form of FDI. So the US have invested more FDI in Ireland than they have in India, Russia, Brazil, and India combined. It's a staggering statistic, and it's true. So, I mean, that just shows you the extent of A, the relationship between Ireland and the US, and B, the extent of investment that's happening there. And that's why, you know, you've got Google there with 10 or 12,000 people, whatever it is. And, you know, almost every Fortune 500 company has some level of representation in Ireland. So it's really an exciting place to be.
Yeah, quite unexpected.
Yeah.
There's another question here. It's understood that the underlying assets of the subject investment are social housing and nursing homes, and there is a capital protection, and the anticipated annual return is stable and attractive. What is the level of annual return the applicant would be looking to?
So the social housing investment, which is a 3-year investment, doesn't actually offer a return. And then the nursing home, which is a 5-year investment, those returns would be in the range of 4% per annum.
Got a couple more questions. Regarding the $2 million net asset requirement, is this cash only, or what other types? I think you've touched on this a little bit, but
Yep.
Maybe you could let us know what other kind of assets.
Sure. Again, it can be anything, essentially property, stocks, funds. like I mentioned, insurance with cash value, as long as it can be evaluated, and that's fundamentally it, right? It can contribute to the 2 million in assets. And again, IIP is one of the most flexible program, especially in the asset requirement.
Yeah. Well, once you can demonstrate the value with an independent valuation, then it's an asset. So literally any asset can qualify. I mean, art, anything.
Yeah. And a lot of Hong Kong people would also ask, is Provident Fund, would that contribute as well? And the quick answer is yes, because it does contain a cash value. Yeah.
Interesting. So for people comparing Ireland against maybe the UK or other kind of European countries, I mean, we've talked a little bit about this, well, quite a lot about the strengths of Ireland. Why pick Ireland over UK or Britain maybe?
A lot of reasons. The main reason I think a lot of people will choose Ireland over the UK, just on a pure program perspective, is that the UK requires you to live there for 6 months a year, which, you know, as we said from our client profile, just doesn't suit a lot of people. You know, a lot of people are still in Hong Kong. They've got, you know, good jobs. Their kids are in school. They don't want to go anywhere. You know, they just want to have this in the background that, you know, if they need to, they can go there. You know, and when they're ready, if the kids are 12 or whatever, they want to go to an Irish high school, then they'll move. You know, that the UK doesn't give you that flexibility. So that's the biggest one. And then it comes down to the country differences. I mean, job opportunities, as I mentioned, immeasurably superior. You know, education systems very comparable, both at secondary and tertiary. And then, you know, what Ireland has, I think that the UK doesn't have, is you've got this incredible ecosystem of innovation that's going on, you know, and I think that's really what attracts a lot of people. Like the Trinity produces more entrepreneurs than Oxford and Cambridge, for example. You know, Trinity has one of the best incubation centers in the world for post-grad entrepreneurs. Enterprise Ireland, which is a government body which is set up to sort of, you know, promote growth in Irish businesses. It's actually the largest VC in the world by investment amount. So, you know, there's all this really interesting things going on, and it keeps coming back to this ecosystem of innovation, this digital ecosystem that's there, and I think that's really a massive draw for people.
So I've just got another question that's popped up. William is asking, how can we contact you, James?
Oh, I mean, very easily. So if you just go to our website, just Google Bartra, or just put Bartra Wealth Advisors into Google, or just go to our website, bartrawealthadvisors.com. You'll find us there. You know, as I said, I'm based in our Shanghai office. Jeff runs our Hong Kong operation, and then it depends where you are in the world. So.
How many offices do you have again? You mentioned you've got coverage.
5. So Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, Hong Kong, and Ho Chi Minh. And then we're in the process of opening Dubai and then possibly India. But I mean, as it stands, 5. Obviously, our head office in Dublin as well. So I'd include that. So 6.
Got a question here about Bartra's track record. You've already touched on that, but is there anything further you might want to mention about Bartra?
Our track record. Yeah, I mean, I suppose you just need to drive around the city. The main thing I always point to is, like, you know, we came into this market about 4 years ago, sort of early 2017, and we said we were going to build a lot of nursing homes and a lot of social housing, and we've done that. You know, we've got 3 nursing homes, which are, in my opinion, 3 best in the country, and validated by a lot of other people too. We've got 3 more in the pipeline, and we're going to continue to build out that program. And, you know, we've made commitments to investors and we've lived up to them. That's the most important thing. Our social housing portfolio is the largest in the country. We've just actually sold 2 of our first social housing projects. So, you know, again, that's, you know, we've said, here's the idea, here's what we're going to do, and this is what's going to happen. And we've done it, and it's happened. So, I mean, that to me is what you're looking for in track record. And as well, transparency. You know, it's easy to say, oh, we've built 3 nursing homes, you know, and it's like, okay, where are they? You know, so there's other people in the market who have a very non-transparent track record, shall we say, you know. And with us, it's like, you know, we'll give you the address, we'll show you the live construction camera, you can go out there, you see it. I mean, utilize easy resources. I mean, Google us. You'll see so many articles around us, and especially in Hong Kong. I mean, there's been a huge amount of coverage of our company in the local media there. And this is all comes back to my point about third-party validation. It's like, it's easy for us to tell a nice story, but it's like, what are other people saying? And it's like, what have we done? So it's the kind of thing in business. It's easy to talk a good game, and it's about what you do. It's not what you say, it's what you do, right? So I think that's the most important thing when it comes to track record. We set out a few years ago and we said we were going to do something. We've done exactly that. That to me is the most important part of track record.
Yeah, and just to add, I think more importantly, everything is done on time, on budget. Right, as a developer, that's what we really strive for.
Very
on
good
time,
point.
on budget.
Yeah. We also opened 2 nursing homes during the worst pandemic the country's seen the world's seen in 100 years, which I think in itself is a pretty significant feat.
Yeah. Did you have any COVID-related challenges, or things that run pretty smoothly?
Nursing homes were unbelievably adversely affected by COVID, and we, handled it, I would say, the best out of anyone. There was actually an amazing situation where 3 of our nurses moved into one of our nursing homes because they didn't want a situation where they're going back and forth and putting the patients at risk. So, the team we have at home, our healthcare division, are really phenomenal. They're definitely the best in the country, and I would say globally would have a shot too. They're really amazing at what they do, and how they manage the whole situation with COVID was absolutely phenomenal. There's been no cases in our nursing homes for 7 or 8 months or more, and how the whole thing was managed was really amazing. There was actually an article in the Irish Times about that, about our nursing staff and their commitment to the patients. It's really just phenomenal stuff. So
I clearly believe in it strongly.
And,
I just got one more
in terms
question.
of right now, all of our nursing homes have been vaccinated at this stage.
It's quite an achievement.
Yeah.
I've just got one more question that's popped up. Penny wants to know, what is the population of Ireland? Is there sufficient supply of labour for nursing home and other businesses in Ireland?
Great question. So the population of Ireland is pretty much 5 million. I think it's 4.9, but like use 5 as a round number.
Yeah.
Is there enough supply of labour? No, is the short answer. That's why, being a member of the EU is so valuable to the Irish economy. And that's why we're very open to immigration. We recognise immigration as a vitally important part of any economy. No one country has all the skills they need. They need to import skills. Like a lot of our nurses, for example, will come from different parts of the world. Because there just isn't a supply of nurses at home. And then same with the construction industry in Ireland at the moment. The construction industry in Ireland is like extremely busy, shall we say, because there's a huge amount of construction going on at home. And yeah, there needs to be a lot of people brought in to sort of fill those particular skills. But it's by no means causing any. It's not like that's causing a blockage in anything. It's just we're lucky in that we're a very open economy with a very positive disposition towards immigration, and we can recognize that immigration is a vital important part of economic development.
Excellent. Just as we wrap up a little bit, I was just wanting to make sure that we've discussed anything. Is there any glaring big areas where I haven't asked you about, or any key points that the audience perhaps should be aware of?
The only other thing we could do, we need the aid of imagery to show just how kind of beautiful Ireland is, and the scenic aspect of Ireland, which is another very, very important part of Ireland. I mean, a lot of movies are shot in Ireland for that reason. Star Wars is filmed in Kerry, Harry Potter has been filmed on Cliffs of Moher. So I mean, there's a lot of that side of it too. It's a beautiful country to live. There's very clean, fresh air. The Irish produce is phenomenal. Ireland, I think, on the island of Ireland, we make enough food to feed 60 million people, despite there only being 5 million there. So there's a lot of other stuff, and we are restricted by the hour. I could keep going, but I think we've delivered the main points.
I just have one more question. Teresa wants to know, what's the retirement age in Ireland?
Don't know. I'm a few years off. I think it's
I believe 66. I believe the state retirement age, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. If you shoot us an email, Teresa, we'll get that. I mean, one of the guys will have it in the office. Either 65 or 66.
Yeah.
Clearly a beautiful place to retire in.
Exactly. Yeah. It's one of the best golf courses in the world. among other things.
Awesome. Jeffrey, you didn't have anything further you wanted to add?
No, nothing in particular. I think, just as a wrap up, we are the first developer in Ireland to have physical presence in Hong Kong or many other cities to actually offer direct immigration services to our client. So that's an important note to add here. Traditionally, people, when it comes to immigration, they would go to a third party, an agent, for example. And this is something we're trying to change, right? We're trying to offer a direct service to our clients, from the early inquiry stage to actually lodging your application to the point where you actually invest. Everything is done via Bartra, right? We are the one company here. So that should, again, make things a lot easier and a lot more safe for investors.
Yeah, the other ancillary benefit to that as well is, like, when you're dealing with us, we've got landing teams in Dublin. We know all the schools, we know all the real estate guys, we know all the banks. So it's very easy for us to plug people into that network. And I think when people are relocating, it can be a daunting task. And it's good to have professional people on the ground who know what they're doing. I went through that myself when I moved to Shanghai, and I was lucky that at the time my business partner had a company here, so I was able to sort of leverage a lot of his network, and that's really important when you're relocating. To be able to be plugged into these various channels, especially on the education side, because I think that's the main driver for a lot of people.
Excellent, and hopefully when the borders are less strict, people can go see it for themselves.
Yep. Yeah.
Thank you both so much, Jeffrey and James. Really great to talk to you. And like you mentioned, your contact details are readily available for people who can reach you. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about Ireland and the immigration opportunities there.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thanks for your time.
Elizabeth.
Great to talk.
Thanks, everyone.